Till now, what are the operating system that we have discussed earlier, whether it is serial processing operating system or batch processing or multi-programming or time sharing system, all of these operating systems are uniprocessing. Uniprocessing means what? They were having only one processor or one CPU. But as the time goes on, the work has been increased. That means what? A large amount of work has came for execution, right? So at that time it was difficult for a processor to execute all those processes, right? Because it will execute, but the performance of the system will be drastically dropped down. So what expert has decided, it's better to have two or more than two CPU when we are facing with the problem of execution of large amount of work, right? So then multiprocessing operating system has came into picture, right? What is the concept of multiprocess operating system is that instead of one processor we are having more than one processor. Maybe it starts from 2 and more than means it starts from 2, and when it is required we can use as number amounts of CPU, right? So I have made some points which is very important in multiprocessing operating system. First is that this operating system is used when huge amount of jobs are also known as process are to be executed, right? Because at that time having only one processor is not at all sufficient, right? Say for example, suppose you have organized a party and you have made only one cook. So how it is possible to prepare the large amount of food by one cook? So either what you will do, you will just take the group of the cooks, जिसमें कि एक से ज़्यादा cooks होंगे, ताकि जैसे जैसे भी हमारे पार्टी में जो लोग आए वो लोग जब भी उन लोगों को खाने की ज़रूरत पड़े जिस भी समय पे food must be available, right? That is why when the jobs are very large, at that time we have to have more than one processor, right? Next, normally it may start from 2 or more CPU for the better performance, right? Instead of one, when you will go for 2 or more CPU, certainly the performance of your system will be drastically, it will be increased, right? Next one is that resources are get shared among these CPUs, right? Not CPU, it must be CPUs, right? So this is a very good point that CPU जितने भी अगर हम लोग अगर लेंगे वो CPU अदर जो रिसोर्सेस हैं उसको आसानी से क्या करेंगे, वो लोग आपस में शेयर कर लेंगे, right? Such as common bus system means CPU can share bus system also, shared memory that is known as your main memory, and different IO devices, right? IO devices means what? Input output devices. So let's take the concept of multiprocessing operating system with one neat and clean diagram. So let's watch this diagram and try to analyze what diagram says about multiprocessing operating system. So here I have taken 2 CPUs only. You may take more than 2 CPU according to the demand, according to the desire, but here I have just made a basic block diagram of multiprocessing operating system, right? Okay, this is a block diagram, okay, in which I have taken 2 CPU, that is CPU 1 and CPU 2. These CPUs are directly connected with memory. This memory is known as your main memory, and since main memory is shared with so many things, right? That is why main memory is known as shared memory also, right? So directly two CPUs are shared with your shared memory, and CPU is also, these CPUs are also connected with IO units through your IO processors, right? So CPU can interact with the IO unit with the help of IO processors also, right? And these IO processors are also connected with the shared memory or main memory directly. And third, the main thing is that the CPU is also sharing the common bus system. Common bus system is the bus system which is used to take the data and address from memory to CPU and CPU to memory, right? So by watching this diagram, we can well imagine that we have taken two CPU and CPU are sharing the resources, whether it is memory, whether it is IO units, or whether it is a bus systems, right? So the main issue is that how multiprocessing operating system is installed in a system, right? So before installation of multiprocessing system, operating system in a system must have some constraints. What are some important constraints are? First constraint is that it should have motherboard support, right? How? So the motherboard should be able to handle more than one processor. That is very mandatory, right? That motherboard should be suitable to handle more than one processor, and for that a motherboard should have some extra sockets or slots for CPU, right? Okay, fine. Next is known as your processor support, right? So how processor support is being done? See, it is the responsibility of my multiprocessor processing operating system to allocate the different tasks to different CPUs, right? We all know that it is the responsibility of operating system to utilize the CPU as well as to the resources. But here the responsibility of multiprocessing operating system is enlarged. How it enlarged? Because several jobs or several processes has came for execution, and it is the responsibility of this operating system that which task should be allocated to which processor, right? That is very mandatory, right? Second one is that we are using threading concept. What do you mean by threading concept? Threading concept means if your process is too large, right? So process should broken into small pieces, and these small pieces can be executed on several other CPUs. It's not like that okay, a task or a process is allocated to one CPU only, so it has to be take care of the entire process. Not like that. We can have the threading concept also if my process is too large. So in threading concept, what does it happens that the process is broken into small pieces, and it may so happen that these pieces can be allocated to different CPUs for execution simultaneously, right? Okay, fine. Next, by applying this processor support, certainly the performance of OS is very nice, very important. The performance of OS is very good. Why it is good? Because we are having n number of processes to execute large amount of process or large amount of job. So ultimately, if large amount of job will come, then also there is no problem, because I am having so many processors to execute them very well, right? That is why it is also called it as the performance of multiprocessing operating system is much more better than other earlier operating system, right? Apart from that, there is a parallel processing concept. Parallel processing concept means what? That if I am having too many CPUs which is running, so they can run simultaneously, right? They can run simultaneously without bothering about the other processor whether they are working or not. So the processing of the execution of CPU will be in the simultaneous process, right? That is why sometimes it is also known as parallel processing. So to run multiprocessing operating system on a system must have locking scheme. What do you mean by locking scheme? Let's watch one by one, right? So in multiprocessing system, operating system, as we all know that there are several CPUs and there are several resources. So there will be so this is a possibility that various CPU will demand various resources. In that situation, it may so happen that there may be some conflict. Conflict means what? That some of the CPUs are demanding for the same resource at a time. So that is known as your conflict or sharing problem, right? What is the sharing problem? Suppose too many CPUs are if they are demanding for the same resources, then the resource should be allocated to which CPU? अब ये कौन decide करेगा? Who will decide? So that is known as a conflict or sharing problem. So this sharing problem is resolved by locking scheme. How locking scheme? Suppose here I have given in description. Suppose I'll read out the sentence, then I will explain you, right? Suppose in locking system, suppose a resource is accessed by a CPU, right? Then the status of the resource will be locked, right? And get released for the other CPU when the first CPU will release it. Now what does it mean? Suppose, ठीक है, for a particular resource there is a conflict or there is a sharing problem. So उस चीज को कैसे हम लोग रिजॉल्व करते हैं कि अगर एक सीपीयू ने अगर एक रिसोर्स को अगर ऑलरेडी अगर लिया हुआ है, तो बाकी लोगों के लिए एक चीज होगा कि बाकी लोगों के लिए उस रिसोर्स का स्टेटस होगा लॉक्ड. तो बाकी सीपीयू वेट करेगा टिल तब तक जब तक से कि वो लॉक रिलीज ना हो जाए. यानी कि अभी बाकी सीपीयू को पता है कि ये रिसोर्स अभी कहीं किसी ना किसी के साथ एंगेज्ड है. Are you getting my point? Say for example, in hospital also, when you want to suppose you are having some appointment with the doctor, suppose you want to enter the doctor's cabin. So doctor cabin में वहाँ पे एक चीज लिखा रहता है doctors in and doctors out. That means if the doctor is already watching a patient, you have to wait for sometimes till the patient will come out. सेम चीज यहां पर भी होता है कि जब तक से सीपीयू उस रिसोर्स को पकड़े हुए है या एलोकेटेड है, तो उस रिसोर्स का जो स्टेटस होगा वो क्या होगा? लॉक्ड होगा. करेक्ट? ओके. एंड एज सुन एज द सीपीयू विल रिलीज द रिसोर्स, तो उसका लॉक का स्टेटस क्या हो जाएगा? फॉल्स हो जाएगा. एंड दैट रिसोर्स मे बी गिवन टू द अदर CPU. So in this fashion, the sharing problem can be resolved easily by using locking scheme, right? Okay, now see what is going to happen. Why we are using this locking scheme? So by using locking scheme, this will solve many problems. This locking scheme will solve many problems such as conflict. Conflict is what? Conflict in sharing the resources. This will be reduced, or this will be eliminated. Critical section problem. What is critical section problem? Critical section problem, I will teach it after some time, but I am just giving you one look over this critical section problem. Critical section problem is what? Ki suppose a process is executing in its critical section, so at that time no other process can enter its critical section. Right? So such type of critical section problem is resolved by this locking scheme only, and this problem I will teach in your process synchronization. Right? In process synchronization I will take this topic very elaborately, and also we can overcome the situation of race condition problem. Suppose there is a race to acquire a resource, right? So by locking system, these type of problems are automatically, it will be vanished out, right? And sometimes it is also very important to reduce or to eliminate deadlock problems also. So there are very salient features in multiprocessing operating system that a system must have. Means earlier the system must have to acquire these type of prerequisites, right?